Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, and in this video we'll be covering General Process Act 1897. So I'll be covering this entire act in English and it will be divided into 5 lectures. So once you cover all the 5 lectures which I'm going to upload on YouTube, you'll be able to understand the entire act and you will be answering the questions with ease. So let's get started and understand what is this General Process Act 1897. Okay, so once you watch this lecture, you can go to ICI study material and you will be able to understand the entire chapter or the concept that we have covered. So what I would suggest is watch the video, write my notes, and then you can go back and refer to your study material. Okay, so let's get started and understand why this General Process Act 1897 has come. Okay, so if you must have already gone through Indian Contract Act, Negotiable Instruments Act, Sales of Goods Act, and Companies Act, right? So in all these acts, you have seen a word commonly called as good faith. But have you seen the definition of this good faith in any of these acts? No. So then how do we understand what does good faith means? So the definition of good faith is given in General Clauses Act. As the name suggests, general clauses, that means it will be applicable to all the acts. So if there is no definition given in that particular act, so where will you come and see for the definition? You will come and see for the definition in the General Clauses Act. Okay. If it is not given in the General Clauses Act also, then you can refer to dictionary or you can go to Google or any commonly whatever the word means. That will be the meaning of the word. So General Clauses Act is also called as Interpretation Act of India. So only if you know that particular act and also what is there in General Clauses Act, that is when you will be able to interpret the whole act. Okay, so in some of the in all the acts, you see that he is liable for punishment. He will be liable for fine. So does he means is it only are they only talking about male gender? Are we females? Can we do anything and get away? No. So he also means she. But where is it written? It is written in the General Clauses Act. See, every time I want to write an act, if I write he oblique she, won't the act be lengthy? So in order to avoid that, if I say he means also she. So in that case, if I just write he, the language of the act will be shortened automatically, right? So again, I don't have to give good faith's definition in all the acts. If I just make a common act and say that if you want the meaning, go there and see. So it'll be easy for everybody. There will be uniformity. The language of the act will also be shortened, right? So that is the reason General Clauses Act has come. So let's go ahead and let's see what else is there in General Process Act. Okay, so basically this act has been divided into 6 parts. Okay, we'll be talking about introduction, general definitions. So just this general definition I'll be doing in the last lecture, what are relevant for your exam. So you need not do all the definitions. Then we have section 5 to section 30, which will cover in the General Process Act. So how am I going to cover my lectures? I'm going to cover these lectures in 5 parts. Okay, so in the first lecture, I'll be talking about preliminary things about General Clauses Act. And this preliminary thing is very important for you to understand all the particular definitions, all the particular sections later. And this preliminary thing lecture is also important for you to answer your MCQs. Okay. So moving ahead, let's have some introduction about this General Clauses Act. Okay. Suppose, let's say in an organization or in any act, to appoint a person, the power is given to Mr. A. So there is Mr. A. He is a person who can appoint any employee. Okay, he can recruit any employee. So this power has been given to Mr. A. Okay. Now in the act, there is nothing written about who can remove an employee. So in the act, they gave who can appoint an employee, but they did not give the power who can remove an employee. So here in this case law, Raya Rappan versus Madhavi Amma, AIR means All India Reporter. So it's a reporter where all the case laws, all the cases will be written. And this judgment has come in 1950, passed by a federal court. And the page number in this All India Reporter about this case is page number 140. It starts from 140. Okay, so that is about this case law. So what did it say in the case law? The court had said, whoever has the power to appoint a person, that person will only have the authority to remove also. Okay. Suppose nothing is written in the particular central act. Whoever has the power to appoint will automatically be assumed to have the power to remove a person also. Okay. Suppose in Companies Act, we can see that an auditor can be appointed by the shareholder. Okay. But an auditor can also be removed by the shareholder. This is particularly given in the Companies Act. No. So if appointment who can do, removal who can do, it is already given in Companies Act, then we will follow Companies Act only. But if it is not given who can remove a person, then we will automatically assume that whoever has the power to appoint a person will also have the power to remove a person. Okay. So that is what is given, and that is what is understood by this particular case law. Okay. So moving ahead, now we will be talking about what is preamble. Okay. What is preamble? So any act which is coming into picture, we need to know why this act has come. What is it talking about? Right? What is the intention of the person to bring this act? Okay. So preamble discloses the intention of the legislator, but that does not mean that preamble has the highest power to interpret or to understand the act. Okay. If you want to understand the act, you will have to understand the provisions that are given in the act. If you're unable to understand the provision, you can take the help of preamble. Okay. You can take the help of preamble. Okay. So preamble is only useful till there. But suppose in provision something else is given. It is not matching. It is not hand in hand with the preamble. Then you will have the power for the provision more, not the preamble. Okay. Preamble will only help you if you have any doubts. It will not help you to understand where there is ambiguity. Okay. It cannot override the provisions. It will not have higher power than the provisions given in that particular act. Okay. So here you can see the preamble of Companies Act. So in the Companies Act, it is given that it is an act to consolidate and amend all the laws relating to a company. So that is about the preamble of company. Now moving ahead, how does an act come into existence in India? Okay. So we need the approval of both the houses of parliament, that is Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. And after that, the act will be given the assent by the President of India. So once the President of India gives the assent, then only an act will be published in the official gazette, and then it becomes finally an act to be followed by the citizens. Okay, so that is how act comes into place. Now moving ahead, we will be talking about some terms which are very important for you to understand an act. Okay, so the first set of words that we are going to talk about is shall and may. Shall means anything, any word, any sentence that has shall, that means it is mandatory in nature. Okay. So if I say, you shall come to my class at 10 a.m., that means it is mandatory for you to come to the class at 10 a.m. Okay. So if I say, you may attend my second lecture, that means it is, you generally feel that ma'am is not telling that it is compulsory for you to attend the second lecture, right? So may is discretionary in nature. That means if you wish to follow, you can follow. If you do not wish to follow, you need not follow, right? So that is shall and may. So shall is mandatory, you have to do it. May is discretionary. But sometimes what happens in the place of shall, the lawmaker can write may. In the place of may, he can write shall. So then how do we understand? He's using them interchangeably. He's using them as synonyms. So in that case, how do we understand if it is mandatory or discretionary in nature? So in that case, you will have to see the intention of the lawmaker. Intention of the lawmaker. Did he mean it is mandatory or did he mean is it discretionary? So you need to understand by thinking from the shoes of the person who has written the law. Okay. For example, here in the Companies Act, it is given that Companies Act 2013, it is given that a company may be formed for any lawful purpose. For any lawful purpose. So, as we just said, may is discretionary. If you want to follow, you can follow, otherwise, you cannot follow. That is generally what is may. But if you see it over here, so does it mean that if I want to form a company, I can form it for lawful purpose? Is it discretionary? Obviously, no. Here it is compulsory, mandatory. If you want to form a company, you should only form it for lawful purpose, right? So here, when he said may, his intention was to say it as shall. His intention was to create a mandatory thing over here. So you need to understand the objective also behind the person, whoever is writing the law. But generally, shall means mandatory in nature, may means discretionary in nature. So moving ahead with the next set of words, here we are going to talk about means and includes. Okay, so you often come across these words. Means, what is means? Means exhaustive in nature. That means it is complete. Okay, if you want to add anything also, I cannot. Okay, it is a hard and fast definition. Hard and fast definition means whatever I have given to you, stick to that. Don't include anything else. Okay, but whereas if I talk about includes, that means it is an inclusive definition. Inclusive definition means you can go behind the words to interpret it. Not only whatever I have given you, you can go beyond it also, but you should keep the objective of the provision in mind. Include does not mean you can include anything, any object, anything. No, you can only include whatever is relevant. Okay, though it is not given, you can include whatever is relevant. Okay, so for example, in the definition of company that is given in Companies Act 2013, it states that company is any body corporate that is incorporated as per this Companies Act 2013 or any previous Companies Act. So it means only those organizations which are incorporated in this act or previous Companies Act, nothing else. So that is the meaning of the word company. Moving to inclusive definitions, here the definition of body corporate, it is given as body corporate includes a company incorporated outside India. So now what does this word includes means? It does not only include a company which is incorporated outside India, it can include any other organizations also as body corporates. Okay, so that is about the words means and includes. Now we need to understand, suppose in any definition it is given both means and includes, then what do we do? If both means and includes are given, it is again exhaustive in nature, it is complete, you cannot add anything else. So here you can see the definition of share. Share means share capital of company and also includes stocks. So after beyond this you cannot go. So share means only share capital of the company and includes stock, that's it. So that is about means plus includes. Now we are going to talk about history of General Clauses Act. Now if you need to understand about to what acts General Clauses Act is applicable, you need to understand this history. Okay, this is also very important for your MCQs. So please pay attention when I'm talking about history of General Clauses Act. So the first time General Clauses Act has come in 1868, that is on 3rd January 1868. Then it was repealed and a new act has come in 1887. Just like how we had Companies Act 1956 and how we got 2013. So like that only General Clauses Act first came in 1868, then it came in 1887 and it came in 1897. Okay. So here only I can form three particular timelines. 1868, then it came in 1887 and it came in 1897. Okay. So obviously, you know, whatever acts were there before this General Clauses Act is not applicable because I cannot go retrospectively and apply an act, right? So those acts which have come before 1868, for them, General Clauses Act 1897 is not applicable. This is something that we already know. But what about those acts that have come in between this? We also know that whatever acts have come after 1897, we know that for them also General Clauses Act 1897 is applicable. But what about those acts which have come between 1868 to 1897? So to those acts, is General Clauses Act 1897 applicable or not? So we'll be seeing that in the next slide. But before we go there, let's understand why this General Clauses Act has come. Okay, so this General Clauses Act has come so that you can understand the language of the act if the definition or if the meaning is not clear to you. Okay, to shorten the languages of central acts, we have already seen that, so that to bring an uniformity so that all the acts can form some universal thing that is already given. Okay, in the absence of any definition in that particular act, you can come back here and see the definition. It also creates any conflicting provision. So suppose in one particular section I'm writing good faith means X, in one particular provision I'm writing good faith means Y. So in that case, how do we understand what is good faith? So you can just come to General Clauses Act and you can see the meaning and you can understand the definition of good faith very easily. So that is about the purpose of General Clauses Act, and this answer is also very important for your examination purpose. They can just ask you the objective behind General Clauses Act. Okay. So as I told you, General Clauses Act is also called as Interpretation of Act of India. Okay. So moving ahead, we'll be talking about General Clauses Act applicability, as I just told you. Okay. So to those acts which have come before 1868, for them, General Clauses Act 1897 is not applicable. Okay. For example, Indian Penal Code, it came before 1868. So for that, General Clauses Act is not applicable. Now we are going to talk about those acts which came in between 1868 and 1887, because in 1887, 1868 Act has been repealed. So to those acts which are formed in this between these two periods, for them, is 1897 Act applicable? No, it is not completely applicable. It is only partially applicable. Partially means only some definitions in 1897 Act are applicable. Now, ma'am, how do we know what definitions are applicable to these acts that came in between this period? So here section 4 talks about what are the definitions that are applicable to those acts that have come in between this period. Okay. Now, one more period that we have is between 1887 and 1897. What about those acts that have come in this period? So for this also, General Clauses Act is not completely applicable. It is only partially applicable. Now, what are partially applicable? We already have section 4 to see. Okay. Now, after 1897, whatever central acts that have come, central acts that have come, for them, General Clauses Act is fully applicable. Okay. Now, this 18, the period from 1897 also I can divide into two periods. Okay. Before the Constitution of India has come, after Constitution of India has come. So you know Constitution of India has come on 26 January 1950. Okay. So before the Constitution has come, the acts in India were given, were formed as acts. They come as acts if it is given the approval of Constituent Assembly, and also we needed assent of Governor General of India. But after Republic Day, we have a parliament, so we need approval of parliament and the assent of President of India. Then only an act will become an act. Then only a bill, when passed, will become an act. Okay, so here we have examples of two acts also. Sales of Goods Act that came in 1930, that is before Republic Day. So if this act was to be formed, we needed the approval of Constituent Assembly and the assent of Governor General of India. After Republic Day, we need the approval of Parliament and assent of President of India. And here we have an example of Companies Act 2013. So here, for any acts that have central acts that have come after 1897, there will be full applicability of General Clauses Act. Okay, so moving ahead, here we will be talking about the division of states. How are the states divided in the India, in the Republic India? So according to the Constitution of India, the states of India are divided into 4 parts. Okay, they are divided into 4 parts. Now, what are these parts? So we have part A, part B, part C, and part D. So you can listen to this like a story. So in part A, the states which were ruled by Britishers, come under part A. Okay. In India, some states were also ruled by some Rajas. So whatever the states were ruled by Rajas used to come in part B. In part C, it used to be a mix of both. That means both the states which were ruled by Rajas but couldn't be controlled by them completely will come in part C. Part D, we only have Andaman and Nicobar. So let's see the administration of this particular states, because only if we know the administration of these states, that is when we'll know who has the power to make acts, right? So as per part A, these were the states which were ruled by former Governor General. So here the power is given to Governor General. Provinces of British India were ruled by elected government. Okay, so here we have examples as Assam, Bihar, and Calcutta. or you can say Madras also comes here. Then we can say Bombay also comes here because they were ruled by Britishers. Okay, that used to that will come under part A. So moving ahead to part B. Part B, these were the formerly princely states or groups of princely estates governed by Raj Pramukh. So a Raja used to rule these particular states. Okay, and he is the owner of the state. For example, we have Jammu and Kashmir, Hyderabad, Mysore. Then moving ahead, we have part C. So in part C, we have a combination of both former province and some princely estates. So here it is governed by chief commissioner. So we have Coorg, Delhi, and Bhopal as examples. Then part D, it is only Andaman and Nicobar. So it is even now administered by a lieutenant governor. Okay. So after this, what happened? In about 1956, the states of India have been reformed, and then we divided the states as per the language that people spoke. Okay, so that is about the history of division of states as per the Constitution of India. So now, how is this relevant to our topic? So we need to understand what is central government. Okay, so central government means before independence has come, before constitution has formed, that is before 26th of January, central government means governor general, government of province, with respect to laws of provinces. That is part B that we saw. So part A, part B, part C and part D are covered over here. Chief Commissioner and state of union territory of Chief Commissioner. So we also know that India has union territories. Here basically they're talking about Andaman and Nicobar. Now moving ahead, on or after 26th of January 1950, central government means President of India, state government with respect to laws of state government, then Chief Commissioner, Lieutenant General of State, like Delhi has a Lieutenant General. Then we have Administrator of Union Territory. So in each Union Territory, there is an administrator who governs that particular Union Territory. So all these people are called the central government. Again, this definition is also given in the General Clauses Act. Okay, so with this, we finished the lecture 1, which is talking about all the preliminary information that you need to understand the section 5 and section 5 till section 30 of General Clauses Act. So wherever you want to understand and write your notes, you can just pause the video and write the notes. And also, we will quickly have a glance at your study material, which is relevant for your examination. So here from starting, I have covered all the introduction that is required for you, object and purpose and importance of General Clauses Act, applicability. Then we also spoke about some basic understanding about legislation. We spoke about preamble, we spoke about definitions, means and includes, we spoke about shall and may. Then we went to preliminary things about this particular thing. So that is how we covered all the preliminary things that is required for you to understand the General Clauses Act. So with this, we finish the lecture 1 of General Clauses Act. Any doubts you have, you can post it in the comment section. If this video had helped you, please like, comment and share. And also don't forget to subscribe my channel to understand the other parts of the General Clauses Act. So anything you have, please comment and let me know if this video has been helpful to you or not. Thank you everyone. Have a nice day.